Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sunday Matinee. This is episode 34. I'm your host, Ben Stahl. Last week, we were getting super duper nostalgic for The Lord of the Rings. This week, we're talking about a new movie that's nice and fresh and new, but somehow still manages to encapsulate nearly 20 years of nostalgia for those of us who were really into comic book movies back when they were kind of a new thing. So, before we get started here, let me introduce the panel. Returning for the first time in 2022 is Travis Martinez, my monster guy. Travis, welcome back. I feel like you're going to be really at home with this episode.
I see what you did there.
And also, good to have you. Also coming back for the first time in 2022, who may be posing as our villain today, Jalen Green.
Hello. Good to be back. We'll talk about how great this is here very soon.
Of course we will. And my apologies if I appear to be slipping. My chair is kind of fallen. Joining us on the show for the very, very first time is Kyle Sinclair. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's really exciting to be here.
So before we jump into the main topic, of course, we're going to be talking about some of the stuff that happened in the news this week. First up, very disappointed that this dropped 3 days after we recorded the Lord of the Rings episode. Amazon's Prime Video decided to announce the title of their long gestating Lord of the Rings television series, The Rings of Power, which pretty much confirms what we were all thinking. This show is going to take place during the Second Age of Middle-earth when Sauron was forging all the rings. We still don't know really anything much apart from that, except that it's going to debut on September 2nd. And again, this would have been great to know 6 days ago. But whatever, I'm sure, given the pedigree of films that we enjoy here, I'm sure we're also all Lord of the Rings fans as well. So is there anyone who's not excited for the Rings of Power? Well, there you go.
I got to make waves as soon as I arrive on the scene here. I really enjoyed the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movie, and I feel like The Hobbit sort of tarnished their reputation a bit. So I'm wary of like adding more to this. But if it's telling a different story, I'm open to see where it goes. However, I think that it's creating these sort of indefinitely serialized movies are problematic. This is one of the same criticisms I have of the MCU in general, but we'll get to that.
All right. Yeah, you never know. It's something that has generally in movies been untouched, but there really isn't much to grab from the books apart from the appendices. So we'll see. Man, my chair is really sinking. Okay. Travis, this next news bit definitely applies to you and me. This week, it was announced that the Monsterverse lives, and it is coming to Apple TV Plus. So we now know that Godzilla vs. Kong is not the end. What we're going to get from here on out, I have no idea, but it also means that I'm going to actually have to subscribe to Apple TV Plus. Because
which honestly you should really do, because it's probably, as far as like quality of their originals, probably the best one out there.
It's just there's so many of them.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you there.
I've heard Ted Lasso is amazing. That's one I do want to watch. But yeah, there's just too many streaming services right now. Like Disney Plus is kind of a must-have for a lot of reasons. Netflix has got a lot of good stuff on there, especially after the last few months with movies like Tick, Tick, Boom and Don't Look Up. It's like, okay. But yeah, so much. There's so much out there. But I got to get my monster fix. So, all right. We've got some delays this week. What's probably going to end up being the most delayed movie of the pandemic era, Mission Impossible 7 and 8 have been delayed again. 7 has been delayed from September 30th of this year to July 13th, 2023. Mission Impossible 8 has been delayed from July 7th, 2023 to June 28th, 2024. It has been 4 years. It'll be 4 years this summer since Mission Impossible Fallout. They have really been on a roll with those films, and it's just a darn shame that we're getting so many delays with this one, especially given they gave the pandemic as their excuse for the delay this time again. And I'm not quite sure why, because 7 is basically done from what I've heard. So unless they're really pushing for this to be like the first movie to really, really pack theaters, I don't know. It's upsetting. I really want to see these movies because Fallout was excellent. I'm really glad they're bringing in Haley Atwell into the series. Like, I don't know. It's the one Tom Cruise thing that I think we all have left in the world. So, I don't know.
Very much.
Very disappointing.
I am looking forward to Top Gun, though. Hopefully that doesn't get.
I was never into Top Gun, but I understand the anticipation for that one as well.
It's worth at least a curiosity watch for sure.
Well, moving on to another delay, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever it hasn't been officially delayed, but the production is on hold yet again. There has been a COVID outbreak on set. This coming just, maybe a week after they resumed production, with Letitia Wright coming back from her on-set injury. So I'm kind of worried that Black Panther may end up getting delayed into 2023. We'll see on that one. And finally, Netflix has officially renewed Squid Game. Do we have any Squid Game fans here?
Until the ending, but yes, I am a fan overall.
So we got Squid Game coming back.
Nice.
And they have also announced that Knives Out 2 will be releasing this fall. It will probably be making the rounds in a couple of festivals first. I'm really excited for Knives Out 2. I think the first one is one of the best original films to come to theaters in a long time. I'm kind of disappointed that this one's going to be a Netflix exclusive, because I would love to get back in the movie theater for this one and to laugh with an audience, because the first one was just such a joyful film. Like, I did not expect it coming into late 2019, and it's definitely one of my favorite movies of that time. All right. Before we get into the official stuff here, what have we been watching this week? Any cool stuff? Any great stuff? I saw Nightmare Alley 2 days ago.
Yeah. How was that?
Oh my gosh. I'm a little biased. I love Guillermo del Toro. This is probably his darkest, most cynical film of his recent films. Not to say that his other films aren't dark, but like Shape of Water, Crimson Peak, spoiler alert, they all have fairly, at the very least, neutral endings. I won't say anything to spoil Nightmare Alley, but it's like it's not the fairy tale ending that you get for Shape of Water. I'll tell you that right now.
Nice.
And like many of us, I am watching the Book of Boba Fett every week. So far it's been okay, certainly no Mandalorian, but this week's episode was a little bit better, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next week. And so, I haven't actually done a Star Wars episode for this yet, so Boba Fett may be a prime candidate for a discussion once it's all wrapped up. Does anyone have anything else to say on Book of Boba Fett? Because we've all been watching it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Episode 4 is probably a step up. The first 3 episodes should have been 2, maybe 1. One flashback episode to bring us to the present, 1 episode establishing the Mos Espa politics, and then chapter 4 should have been chapter 3, because it has been so aimless, and so much of what we wanted from a Fett film was already covered in The Mandalorian. It scratched that itch, and so this felt redundant out the gate. I got strong opinions. If you want to do that episode, I'm in.
It's going to be a good episode. This is going to be a very good episode.
I'll keep you in mind for that. All right. Travis, have you been watching anything new? Any big recommendations for the week?
Nothing really new. I've just been moving this week, so when I get home, I just want to sit down and just relax. I put on something. What? Oh, girlfriend's over there saying Encanto, which
Yep.
so there's that, which is pretty good. I think it's a bit. I'm not gonna say anything because I don't want people coming after me. No, never mind on that. But no, it's pretty good. Mostly just been catching up with South Park. Me and my girlfriend, we're on like season 20 or 21 because we want to get to the pandemic special and the post-pandemic special.
And Kanto actually came up last week. Jalen, you would have loved it. Sarah was on the show, and she's, I guess because she has her little girl, has been watching Encanto like all the time, and Sarah's getting a little tired of it.
It's the new Moana.
Yep. Jalen, what have you been up to? Oh, sorry, Travis. Sorry to cut you off.
You're bringing up Moana. I'm like both Lin-Manuel Miranda. That's a tongue twister.
Yes. Yeah, both Lin-Manuel Miranda and Tick Tick Boom. Lin-Manuel Miranda. Can't recommend that. That's definitely one I would recommend. One of the best I've seen this year. I'll give a shout out to an HBO show that just came back that I really enjoyed called The Righteous Gemstones. With Danny McBride and John Goodman. That show is amazing. And Peacemaker on HBO Max, that is a whole lot of fun. A whole lot of fun. I can't just watch the opening credits on YouTube and you'll get instantly hooked. And I saw The Tragedy of Macbeth. And it might be one, if maybe the best filmed adaptation of a Shakespeare play I've ever seen. It was incredible. One of my favorite Denzel Washington performances. And West Side Story. Get thee to a theater and see West Side Story if you feel safe enough to see West Side Story. I was pretty blown away by how much they nailed it. Couldn't believe it.
And did you see Mackers at movie theater? Or did you catch that on Apple?
Mackers I saw on Apple TV. Yeah, another reason to get Apple TV. Ding! I promise you, not sponsored anyway by Apple TV.
Because I know Mackers was playing, has been playing, or was playing at the Grand. But yeah, if you're not feeling safe going out to movie theaters and you have Apple TV Plus, that is probably the way to go. I also want to watch that because I have also heard, it's a Coen Brothers movie, right? Or one of the Coen Brothers.
Yep, it's a half Coen movie.
Half Coen is still good.
Oh, it's so good.
All right, Kyle, have you been watching anything you want to recommend, give a shout out to?
On the topic of streaming services, I will say that one of the reasons that I appreciate Apple TV Plus is because it respects your time in a way the other ones don't. Netflix, of course, is like about engagement. How long can we hook you into the next episode and keep you watching? But Apple TV Plus is just like, these are great stories we want to share with you. So yeah, The Tragedy is fantastic. Encanto. We actually, my wife and I just did a throwback. We watched The Day After Tomorrow. After Don't Look Up. We wanted to go back and see like one of the first really impactful climate disaster movies. And it's amazing how much cinema has changed in the last 2 decades, just how campy and laughable the stakes were in that old one.
Yeah, that's a Roland Emmerich one, and that's kind of his jam. He's got that Moon one coming up. We're gonna see how that goes. I don't know. I've tended to avoid his films ever since he basically ruined Godzilla.
Don't blame me for that one.
But we've talked enough about 1998 Godzilla on the show. We will not delve into that anymore. Instead, we'll delve into, it's finally time to talk about Spider-Man No Way Home.
Woo!
The biggest movie of 2021 in terms of box office and in terms of discourse among people who have seen it and can talk about it to each other. If everyone had seen it, I think we would be seeing once everyone's seen it, I think it's going to explode on social media, on Facebook, and we're going to finally start seeing the memes that we all want to share, but can't because we have those 5 friends out there or whoever. It's like, oh, you haven't seen it yet. Why? So, Kyle, you're the new panelist. So I want to go to you first. Just your gut reaction to No Way Home.
I left the theater impressed. I think it had a lot to do in a very, very short period of time. But what I loved the most about it was how it wasn't afraid to slow down. Marvel has a history of shying away from those slower character-driven scenes in favor of like foreshadowing and advertising future movies. So No Way Home had a lot to do. It had to introduce all of these new characters without assuming any knowledge of them. It had to introduce the stakes and the conflicts and effectively conclude 3 different franchises and 2 different decades of storytelling. So you'd excuse it for having a frantic pace, but instead it indulged in all these long shots and emotional scenes like up on the rooftop, in the lab, and in the coffee shop. And all of the punchy scenes were so much better for it. My one major criticism of it, and we'll get to this later, was actually how the movie was marketed. So I'll leave it at that.
Travis, let me go to you next. What was your gut reaction to it?
So leading up to the movie, actually, like my girlfriend like has not known much of Marvel stuff, so we actually binge watch over a couple weeks, like every Spider-Man movie leading up to it. Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, both the Tom Hollands. We excluded Civil War and the Avengers just because we ain't got time for all that. But with like rewatching those films and then watching the movie, it was just like a big sense of joy and so much fun. And I do agree with Kyle. Like there was such a lot of moments where they decided to slow down and hit emotional beats a lot more than most Marvel movies. Because I will admit, this is probably one of the darker, more serious Marvel movies. Like, and I appreciate it for that. Like, it actually, it's one of those films where when you watch it, it actually enhances the first 2 movies. But I think I'll talk about that more later when we talk about the impact it had on the MCU.
Yeah, just going off of that, I will say they could have taken the easy way out at the end and given it a happy ending for everybody, and they went neutral. It wasn't a tragic ending, but it was not happy at all. Jalen, your gut reaction?
It was one of the best theater going experiences I've ever had in my life. There was an energy in that theater, the likes of which I haven't felt since Avengers Endgame. And it was, we'll talk about the moments when the audience lost their minds. I don't know when. Did you guys see it on opening weekend or? I
saw it opening weekend. I definitely agree with you too with the whole like have not had an experience like that since Endgame, because like while most people didn't cheer, we had a pretty dead audience. Like when the 2 who's this is spoiler talk, so I'm gonna say
yeah.
When Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield both showed up, despite how dead the audience was leading up to it, there was so much uproar. And that's what I miss since the pandemic, is going to a theater and just like experiencing those moments with like your fellow fans.
Agreed. It was, they clapped when Andrew showed up. They lost their mind when Tobey Maguire showed up. And as someone who loves the Raimi Spider-Man films, especially the original Spider-Man, and Willem Dafoe and all of his glory, it was absolutely incredible. One of the best of the MCU. Sure. I can't believe they did it and it worked.
Yeah, that's kind of my gut reaction too, is even going into the movie, and I saw it the opening Thursday night, there was still, even though like there had been leaks and everyone was like, oh yeah, it's going to happen, there was still like, there was this doubt in my mind, like there's just no way. Like, sure, they can get Alfred Molina to come back. Sure, they can get Willem Dafoe, et cetera, et cetera. It was like, but there's no way. There's just no way they're getting both Andrew and Toby to come back. And then it happens. It's just like, okay, all right, you did it. You did the impossible. You did it once with Avengers. Like, whoever thought that you'd get a team-up superhero movie of that caliber You did it again. You one up yourselves with Endgame, and it's like, okay, we're bringing everybody in, and they did something that I don't think any other studio is ever going to be able to do, because there's no other precedent for it. And we'll talk about a little bit of that later with some of the other superhero movies who've been made outside of the MCU. But apart from those, there's no precedent to do. I mean, I guess the next one to be able to do it is going to be when they get the Flash movie with Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck. And that's it. Like, no one else is going to be able to, and I don't think, I love Michael Keaton as Batman, but it's not going to be the same energy that this movie had.
No. Although I'm still going to lose my mind when I see him in the Batsuit.
Oh, yeah.
We all are. The whole world is.
Yeah.
I can't wait. It's what we need and deserve.
Just my favorite live action Batman.
Oh, God, it's so good.
So let's talk about some of our favorite plot points, performances, and moments. I mean, we've already. I mean, that moment when Toby and Andrew show up was like, it's like they did it. But Jalen, what were your favorite plot points, performances, or just moments from the film?
Well, first and foremost, I got to salute to my virtual background. Willem Dafoe ruled the friggin' earth in this movie. Should definitely be meriting some serious Oscar consideration for this. All those villains, the way they handled and improved on, I mean, the ones that were great before were great again, if not even better. And the villains that I didn't much care for in their original iterations were fixed dramatically. Like Electro and Lizard, I were not big fans of in the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films, but in this one they worked. They fixed the Andrew Garfield. Like, I'm excited. I am now excited for Amazing Spider-Man 3 if they see it. I loved how they just fixed that universe. But a huge, tremendous shout out to Willem Dafoe, first and foremost. Just absolutely incredible. I would start there.
Kyle, do you have any favorite plot points or characters, performances?
Yeah, I agree. The villains were absolutely the standout. It would have been very easy to just kind of rehash their stories, but the writers pushed the stories forward. Well, at least for Electro, Doc Ock, and Goblin, because as you mentioned, Jalen, Sandman and Lizard didn't have a whole lot going for them in the first place. But basically any scene with Alfred Molina, I think, was riveting. I really like the takeover of Doc Ock's arms. I like the math that tied up Doctor Strange. The Spider-Man bantering on the Statue of Liberty before the fight was great. I just wish the other Peters had more to do. I'd have to watch it again, but I think we were kind of missing the stylized action from Amazing Spider-Man. The way that Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man moved was very much like a jumping spider, and I didn't quite catch that in how this one was filmed. I have to ask though, does anyone know, I don't think they explained why Doctor Strange's soul punch didn't work on Tom Holland's Peter. Did we get that answer?
I saw it twice, and I don't recall them giving like a direct answer in the film. I'm sure it's something, maybe it ended up on the cutting room floor, or it's going to be one of those wonderful things that, in a few weeks the writer's going to be like, well, this is why, and we're going to be like, okay, sure.
Oh, when he was punched out of his body but still had control of it.
Yeah. Because yeah, I was never really sure, like, is it just because he's Spider-Man? I don't know.
Well, they've given him these sort of godlike powers because he's like as smart as Tony Stark. Now he's out wizarding Doctor Strange. It's a bit much, I think, for this teenager.
Yeah,
eventually he's gonna rip off the spider, and it's gonna be this plastic thing, and he's gonna use it to net some criminals. And
well, next he's gonna pick up Mjolnir. Like, I don't know.
Oh. He could,
because he can basically do anything. It's a bit much.
He can no longer do simply what a spider can. He can do what every other Marvel hero can. Yeah, I get that. I enjoyed the chase through the mirror dimension, but it was kind of like, oh man, like you don't beat Doctor Strange in his own realm. And I'm a little
Yeah.
biased there. We all know how much I love Doctor Strange. So Travis, let's talk about your favorite moments and whatnot.
Well, a lot of them have been said, like the villains, yes. One of my things that to add on to the Willem Dafoe is like even before watching this movie, my complaint always with the first Spider-Man is they took one of the most expressive actors in history and put a mask over him while he's trying to play one of the most expressive comic book characters. So the fact that one of the first scenes he destroys that mask and the whole time it's just Willem Dafoe, like that guy is crazy and scary as hell when you just let him do what he does best. And I also want to applaud him for his age and the fact that he wanted to do all of his own stunts. I think that was the only condition he had for coming back. And I agree, like the three Spider-Men, like I love their chemistry. They worked well off of each other. And the highlight for me was Andrew Garfield. You could tell he had a passion for being this character. And every second he's on set. And I love that I found out recently that line where he says, "I love you guys" to the other Spider-Man was improvised on set. And I actually am also happy that they brought back all the actors for the villains, because I was afraid going in, because you never saw anything with like Thomas Hayden Church's Sandman or Ray Ivan's Lizard. I was so afraid they were just going to have CGI models and they would just not talk the whole time. So the fact that they even brought them back in, even if it's just voiceover, really happy. Which also brings me to the attention to detail when it comes to the characters and all their villains and all that. Because like John Watts didn't direct the original Spider-Man trilogy. He didn't direct the Amazing Spider-Man, but he managed to put so much detail into it. Because I also remember going in, there was also that theory that these aren't the actual villains from the franchise. They're going to be variants. Because Electro looks nothing alike, and Doctor Strange had that line in the trailer, like they all die fighting Spider-Man. Sandman and Lizard never died. But no, like these are the actual characters. They're not different versions. So I'm really appreciative of that. The shot of all three Spider-Men, like that was another moment of the audience cheering. I just love that little moment too, where you see like one Spider-Man sling the webs at them and pulls them, showing how well they work well off of each other. It's like there's just so much good in this movie. I did have some problems with this movie. Is this a sec? Do we have a part where we talk about stuff like that, or?
I didn't write one in, but you know what? Go right ahead.
There was a couple of plot holes in here in this movie that kind of went on first viewing. Even I was just like, what the heck is going on? A minor one is the first film established Spider-Man's suit records everything. So like, wouldn't that record Mysterio and all that? So couldn't he just release footage? You could argue that he turned it off for privacy reasons, which is fair. But then another plot hole that is not explained is Doctor Strange's spell. He specifically states the spell brings in people who knew Peter Parker's Spider-Man. Electro never knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man. And we'll talk about this character later, but also Venom didn't even know Spider-Man, period. So how did both of them get pulled in by the spell?
And I actually have a couple of interesting criticisms that kind of fall toward the end too. It leaves you with a lot of lingering questions. Like, so do all the villains go back to a separate timeline from Maguire and Garfield, because they got pulled from a time where they had already defeated all of their villains. So how many timelines are we getting pulled from here? And once they go back, do they go back right to the moment before they die? Because if that's the case, you know, for the villains that died, looks like they're still gonna die. You know, it's like what happens to everyone when they go back, and how powerful is Strange's spell at the end? Does that spell go across the multiverse? Does everyone forget that Toby and Andrew are Peter Parker in their universes, or is that just a single universe spell? Tough to say. Travis, what you got?
That reminds me of another plot hole that you just brought up. The spell wipes people's memories, but they still have recorded news footage, books, and all of that. So Where did all that go? Does the spell also conveniently wipe all that stuff out too? Because that would just be too much of a plot convenience.
Yeah,
It's
a lot does
magic.
get
Of
wiped.
course, it's a plot
Yeah.
convenience.
I mean, it's good. I think it definitely has to wipe a lot of stuff because obviously there's clearly no record of him ever attending high school, which is why he's taking the GRE.
Yeah.
Or the GED.
Also, one last thing. Sorry, I keep adding more. One moment that I was really hoping they would add in, and I'm so glad it was, is the acknowledgement of Tobey Maguire's natural web shooters and just all the other Spider-Man's reactions to it.
Oh,
yeah, just the differences between
because
all three is wonderful.
Because it is funny, like Tobey Maguire at this point, you could tell has been Spider-Man for like 15, 20 years, and now finding out he's the only Spider-Man that has that type of web shooter, and he's just like, you can't do that? That's such a really nice moment.
I want to go back really quickly to something Kyle said about the style of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I do wish they could have incorporated sort of the cinematography from those films, because one of the things that really made those films unique were the first person moments that really put you in the seat of Spider-Man. I didn't see those films in 3D. I imagine that would have been a real mind bender. But like it's just a cool moment, a cool concept to see what it's like to swing across New York from his point of view. And I think that would have been great to bring back. It also would have helped a little bit in that scene because generally you can tell who's who, but there are moments where it's a little chaotic and you're like, which Spider-Man is which? And Tom Holland's, of course, stands out because he's wearing the iron suit, and that's kind of the only thing. I want to talk about a moment that we haven't discussed yet that, I was at the Thursday night show. That's going to be the most reactive audience pretty much ever. So our first big cheering, clapping moment was actually Matt Murdock. So that was another wonderful surprise, given that Kevin Feige had said Charlie Cox is coming back. You'll see him when you see him, and everyone denying it's not going to be in this movie though, and that whole little conspiracy of he was in the IMAX trailer, but that wasn't him. I was like, and we'll talk about Daredevil a little bit later, but as a huge fan of that particular series, I was thrilled to see him come back because he gives one of the best performances of any character in any Marvel property pretty much ever. So big shout out to Charlie Cox. I'm really glad he's back.
He's an incredible attorney.
He's an incredible attorney. And it was also really funny to see him sitting next to Jon Favreau, who eagle-eyed audiences might remember played Matt Murdock's partner. What's his name? Foggy in 2003 Daredevil with Ben Affleck.
That's right.
So it was kind of cool to see him sitting next to a Daredevil again.
That's right. I forgot about that. I've almost forgot entirely about Ben Affleck's Daredevil. Dang it.
And that's okay. No one's gonna.
No.
No one is upset to have forgotten that. But yeah, it happened. Let's move on. I kind of talked about this a little bit, but Kyle, I want to go to you first again on this one. How has Marvel Studios changed the game again? This was huge. This is different than anything they've ever done.
They seem to have established sort of a pattern in that the third film in a respective trilogy is a big deal. Civil War, Ragnarok, Iron Man 3 to a lesser degree, and then the third/fourth Avengers movies were all climactic events. I wouldn't say then that this was a game changer per se. It was just a larger move in the giant game of chess that they're playing. Introducing the multiverse, I think they handled that pretty delicately here, but I'll talk about that later. I'm wary of it, but we'll see.
Travis, how do you think that Marvel has, if they have, changed the game with this one?
I think I have to agree with Kyle. Like, for the most part, this is like a self-contained story to Spider-Man. The only thing it really can help with the future is like its first mainstream introduction to the multiverse, because not everybody wants to watch all the Disney Plus series, so not a lot of people know about Loki and all of that. And then, even then, like for example, my parents watch it, they still don't understand what the heck is going on in that show. But I think this is like a small step towards the bigger, like Avengers 6, 5, or whatever. I got confused where we were at the timeline there. But yeah, this film actually continues a trend that most of the Phase 4 movies have done, is where like they're not pushing too much to set up future stuff. Like Phase 4, I feel like, for the movies at least, have been very self-contained with maybe tiny hints. And I feel like this is something I'm actually going to talk about later in another subject, about like what they're possibly setting up to. But for the overall MCU, not much, other than like setting up multiverse, and I feel like it's going to be expanded upon in the upcoming Doctor Strange film.
Jalen, what's your take on this?
This was pretty audacious, what they tried to set out to do with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they were able to have as much verisimilitude as they did is how they were able to pull this off. I mean, they made us care about movies that came out 20 years ago, 10 years ago, movies none of us liked. I mean, I enjoyed Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, did not really enjoy the movies that his Spider-Man was in. Now those are required. They made those required viewing. And they're also, I love how this seems to be kind of Phase 4 is kind of leaning into now being able to, now that they have the rights to everyone, now being able to incorporate everyone. And it seems like they're going in a very like Crisis on Infinite Earths direction with Phase 4, which I'm really excited about. So Marvel's stealing one of DC pages, which I love. So yeah, can't wait to see how it all shakes out. And there's a great meme about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, I think I shared on Facebook a couple days ago, that was like our expectations, and you got like the Enterprise and Star Destroyers coming through portals and everyone you can think of in line ready to fight, and it's great. It's something from Ready Player One, essentially. It's like our expectations. It's like, yeah, no, pretty much.
I actually I agree with both Travis and Kyle on, as far as the story goes, this does still feel like very much like a self-contained type of thing that doesn't change the overall universe the way that Civil War did, or change how we feel about a character the way Ragnarok did, and really turn them around. But just in terms of what Sony and Marvel did, again, like, you're not going to see it again until Flash, and after Flash, you're probably not going to see it again unless they pull something really weird in Doctor Strange, which we'll talk about later. But like, I don't think, and honestly hope they don't, bring back characters from other non-MCU franchises, because we do generally love the Raimi trilogy, and even though, as Jalen said, we don't necessarily like a lot of aspects of the Mark Webb films, Andrew Garfield was a great Spider-Man in them. We do hold those two actors up very high among the pantheon of these superhero characters, which is, I think, why they were able to get away with it with this particular character. I don't think they can do that with other characters and franchises. And again, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I love that concept. Like, other studios, years ago did it accidentally. Like, Frankenstein fighting the Wolfman. Like, that was never like some big planned thing. When all the Godzilla characters team up, and destroy all monsters, like, that wasn't, planned 5 years in advance. They just did it because, like, whatever. Like, this is all thought out, and like, they have something planned for afterwards. And, there's even talks of like, do we pick up, Andrew Garfield's storyline where it left off at this point, because all of a sudden people are, finding his story endearing again. It's like, I don't know if that happens again. Like I don't think we're going to get that with Flash. I don't think we're going to get a Michael Keaton continuation of Batman. I think he's just coming back to do these big supporting roles because I love him, but I think he might be aging out of the role in terms of being a lead.
I think they're setting him up to be like Bruce Wayne was in Batman Beyond, more of just like that training the next Batman, because I believe he's coming back for Batgirl, because I think they're retconning and taking Ben Affleck out of the franchise, and Michael Keaton's going to take over as the DCEU Batman.
I'd be okay with him being sort of that Bruce Wayne sort of godfather to the heroes.
Yeah,
that would be great. That actually, I think one of the cute little stories to come out of this film is before this happened, Tom Holland had expressed hope that maybe Tobey Maguire would have been his Uncle Ben.
Oh,
and that would have been lovely, but then we wouldn't have had this.
Yeah, then we wouldn't have had Youth Pastor Spider-Man.
That's right. So let's talk about just how big this movie was, because 2021 was the year that theaters, really started to open back up. And the question kept being, what is going to be the movie to put butts back in seats? And every time a new big movie opened up, everyone said, well, this is the one. First, it was Godzilla vs. Kong, which did pretty well for early 2021. Then it was going to be Black Widow. Black Widow did all right. Its main competition was probably the fact that it was also on Disney Plus at the exact same time. I feel like Shang-Chi was the first movie to really get people back into theaters. It was the first big movie this year to break the 200 million mark. And then it was sort of like, is it going to be No Time to Die? No Time to Die did okay. Nothing came close to this. Why? What was it about this film that did it? Travis, why was Spider-Man the one?
Well, I think Spider-Man. First of all, Spider-Man's always been a very safe box office type of thing. Like, unless they really mess it up, like they did with like Amazing Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man generally will make money. But on top of that, I think it's also just because it did play into the nostalgic aspect, because with the trailers highlighting Green Goblin, Dr. Ock, and Electro, and then later on Sandman, Lizard, like that already has like some recognition. And are we talking about leaks with this, or are we going to add that separate? The leaks,
go right ahead.
Leaks, I'm putting definitely helped out too, because like I put quotation marks because I feel like the leaks were intentionally released by possibly Sony, because from what I hear, the reason why it took so long to even get a trailer, first of all, is Marvel, Kevin Feige was like, don't show Toby and Andrew, but Sony's like, we want to show Toby and Andrew. So I feel like some of the leaks were like intentionally done by Sony as possible advertisement to show like they're in the movie, because the fact that a lot of them weren't, only small channels usually were getting copyright stricken by them, and some of the bigger channels weren't even. People wanted to see it. They wanted to see if it was true. Especially, my favorite thing too is like, if you watch Andrew in any interview leading up to it, he is constantly denying it. And there's also been a lot of talks that Toby privately has been telling people, yeah, I'm in Spider-Man No Way Home. So it was a lot of like, people needed to know if he was there. But yeah, I think it was just because like people wanted the answers. They wanted to know, and they love Spider-Man. So either way, it's going to sell.
Kyle, what do you think?
Are we talking about marketing? That was my biggest gripe. Yeah. I think they shot themselves in the foot with the marketing. It did the movie a major disservice. It did get me back in the theater, but By revealing all of the villains in the trailer, they intrigued me, but they completely sacrificed all surprise. When Garfield and Maguire appeared, I honestly felt nothing. And I was disappointed by that, because they couldn't bring back all those villains without the Spider-Man that opposed them. If they're going the extra mile to get all the actors back, absolutely, they're getting Spider-Man. So I saw it coming a mile away, and I think that they should have advertised it as purely a Spider-Man versus Doctor Strange movie. Maybe include like a hint of a larger villain, like showing Willem Dafoe as if he's a new character, or like showing the cracks in the sky at the end and saying, they're coming through. Just something to suggest that maybe there's more to this. But I do understand why they did it the way they did. As you said, Travis, the villain reveal would draw in the audiences that enjoyed the previous Spider-Man movies, but hadn't gotten into the MCU. And with a tried and true name like Spider-Man, I think that they can afford to reveal less and let the mystery and the word of mouth draw viewers in. If the leaks were there, that would be great. But I think that they ruined it by showing all the villains in the trailer.
One thing I want to add to that is, like, I feel like with the first trailer, the reason they showed Dr. Octopus even in the first place is months prior, Alfred Molina flat out stated he was in the movie and he was getting DH CGI wise. So it was like, I think they had to show Dr. Octopus at least, because it was public. He was like very vocal about it. So I agree with you. I agree. I just saying, I think that's why Marvel had to put Dr. Ock, but everything after that, I feel like I agree with you on that. All the other villains.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, Kyle, because the original plan was, and Marvel has stated this, was to market this film as a Spider-Man versus Doctor Strange Civil War type of film. But then Alfred Molina spilled the beans, and once that happened, it was just the snowball effect. We released one bit of thing, and then stuff leaks, and then people start putting pieces together. It would have been incredible to not know anything at all and just been blown out of the water. And it's not impossible to cover up big things in movies anymore. Like, I had no idea. Once the moment, I've talked about this several times on the show, but once the moment happened, it was like I knew it was coming. But when I first sat down in the theater to see The Force Awakens, I had no idea Han Solo was going to die. Like, there was never any sort of leak on the internet that suggested Han's going to die. By the time you get to the moment, you're like, yeah, he's done. But, like, it's possible. It's possible to hide up a major plot point. There was, I won't say what it was, but there was a major plot point in No Time to Die. Never leaked on the internet.
No, it didn't. No, it didn't.
And actually, there were multiple crazy plot points in No Time to Die. Like, they never leaked. Like, how? It's a Bond movie. It's not Marvel, but it's it's easily in the top 10 like most leakable franchises out there. It's like, no, it didn't. The fact that, and this is a completely different sort of topic, but in the last 2 years, we've had Microsoft buy up Bethesda and Activision Blizzard. And those came out of nowhere. It's possible to hide big things. So, whether we want to blame Alfred Molina or we want to blame leakers or Marvel for just sort of continuing the snowball effect, I think it is possible that there is another universe out there where this movie exists, where no one knew going into the movie theater, and jaws were literally on the floor. And I mean, it was still very exciting to see all the villains and to see Toby and Andrew come back. But, it is definitely less of a surprise when you have no idea. When you go into this thinking, okay, we're just getting Spidey versus Doctor Strange, which, again, if you're me, that would have been exciting anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why this movie was the one to put butts in the seats is, in addition to having Spider-Man, it also had Doctor Strange. So you had, and Wong. So you had 3 Avengers, which is, I mean, this is the first MCU film post-pandemic that was released that had more than one Avenger in it. So you already had a bit of the Civil War aspect to it. And I agree with you guys. I wish that they would have just left it at Alfred Molina. You see him like that. You see Dr. Octopus. You're like, oh my, what is this? And you don't know. Is it the Tobey Maguire Doc Ock, or is it variant Doc Ock? I mean, I still hope that one day we'll get to see Olivia Octavius in all of her glory. Maybe played by Catherine Hahn. Sure, she can play two characters. It's been done before. It's Agatha all along again. Dang it. Yeah, if they had just left it at Doc Ock, just my jaw would have hit the floor when Green Goblin showed up. But yeah, and it's just a really fun, enjoyable 2.5 hours. It's a really fun escape, which we all kind of need right now, and just a really good movie.
I will say it's absolutely a shame that it released right as Omicron was starting to gear up, because it became the biggest movie of 2021, and now we're once again a little bit wary of how we engage with cinema. I right now am less likely to go to a very crowded theater. When I saw Nightmare Alley, it was me and 2 other people, and I was like, cool, okay, probably going to be safe here. I don't necessarily want to go out and see another big No Way Home like showing until, once again, numbers are getting down. And I will say, I think another thing that helped make this film as successful as it was when it opened in December was the knowledge that this is not strictly a Marvel film, it's a Sony film, which means we're not just going to get it on Disney Plus in 2 months. We may have to wait until it shows up on either another streaming service or by the Blu-ray. So can't wait, got to see it now.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and that snowstorm we had certainly didn't help things either, because that was like, I wanted to see it again. I've only seen it once, and I just really want to see it again. Definitely buying that Blu-ray when it comes out for sure.
Oh yeah, that snowstorm.
Shout out to Physical Media.
Always. I'm going to tie the next 2 questions together because they kind of work in tandem. So I want to ask, how might the events of No Way Home shape the future of both the greater MCU and Tom Holland's story? Jalen, I want to jump to you first on this one.
I think now Spider-Man's origin story is complete. They stretched it over 3 movies, which honestly, thinking back to other MCU trilogies, in a way, every MCU trilogy is a 3-movie origin story. But Spider-Man is now Spider-Man. And I'm very excited to see, him working with J. Jonah Jameson, selling stuff to the Daily Bugle to make money, and where we've left him. I'm really excited to see where this Spider-Man goes and to see how the new Spider-Man villains are incorporated.
Yeah, we do. We kind of leave him where he thought he was in Homecoming. He now really is the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's out on his own. He doesn't have the millions of dollars of Tony Stark backing him up. The Avengers may know Spider-Man exists, but he doesn't have he can't just turn to Doctor Strange right now as Peter Parker and say, this is what's going on in my life. He's literally on his own, which is kind of where he feels like he's been in the comics, at least in his early career. So this is it. This is his 3-part origin story that leaves him right where we kind of have expected him to be based on the other film franchises. Travis, where do you feel like this sort of leaves Tom and the MCU?
In terms of just Tom Holland's story, like he said, like they took 3 films to take what normally just takes like 20 minutes in like both the Tobey and Andrew films to establish him as Spider-Man, like the Spider-Man we know and love. Because I know that has been a major complaint with a lot of Tom Holland, or people say with Tom Holland, and he never struggles to be Spider-Man. That's always been one of the major highlights of the characters. Like, you know, he never faces real consequences from what he does. If anything, he's been rewarded, you know, like he stows away on all this stuff, he does this and that, and oh look, he's now an Avenger, he's loved and all that. So like, even just seeing like this film even acknowledging like the screw ups he made in the last film and him having to deal with it, affecting the people in his life and all that, I feel like it definitely changed him mentally, because like another good moment was even at the end when he chose not to retell MJ and Ned who he was, because he knows like he's gonna put them in danger again. So like it's gonna be interesting, because they need seeing him where he's gonna go from here at this point, like the new people he's gonna interact with. Like, is he gonna be interested in another love interest, or is he like gonna do his own thing? As far as like the greater MCU, like I said, they're building up to something, I feel like, with this film, and a lot of people are theorizing about it. Hang on, I'm looking at the itinerary to see if we talk about stuff like this later on. I'll save that part for later, actually, because it does connect with one of our later topics on how it greatly impacts the MCU. But yeah, like I said, as Spider-Man, it's like we see him as the Spider-Man we know and love. He's going to be on his own, so it's going to be interesting to see that part of his story.
Kyle, what's your take on that?
They gave themselves a reset button. They can go any direction they want. Maybe he'll join the Fantastic Four, who knows? But looking into the future, I can't help but see how far we've come. Yeah, right? Maybe they'll do it. Maybe they'll do it right. Think about the original Iron Man, where Tony Stark builds a suit of armor, and it is hard for him. It's taxing. It's a whole movie. He is unfathomably wealthy and intelligent, but those aren't really superpowers. I liked that the universe that they built was reasonably plausible. And then they introduced the magic of Asgard and the cosmic elements of Guardians and Strange. And in doing so, they veered so far from plausibility that now they have a flying cape and teenagers building impervious suits of nanobots for fun. So now they're bringing in the multiverse, where literally anything can happen. I get that these are well-established concepts in the comics, but in the cinematic realm, I think they expanded the universe a little too quickly. Keeping up with the lore and the timeline was already an increasingly huge task, and now they're introducing more timelines and more TV shows. It's asking a lot of the audience to follow this. I appreciate when they introduce new characters, like Ant-Man was kind of its own thing that just came out of nowhere and was its own thing. But the more that they build on everything else, the more people they're probably going to lose. I wonder how they're going to continue to keep everyone up to date on the timeline.
I love that they're expanding, but I can't disagree with that. Just in 2021, we've had them introduce, Shang-Chi was its own self-contained film, but then you have that stinger at the end where it's like, these 10 rings are signaling out, into space. And it's like, okay, so are the 10 rings the next, Infinity Stones? But then we bring in the Eternals, and it's like, and now we are talking about the Celestials, and now that's been introduced, and we cracked that open. And now we have the multiverse, which we introduced in Loki and have continued on in this. And you're not only asking audiences to keep up with these movies, you're now asking them, I think you get away with some of them. Like, you could probably get away right now with not watching Falcon and Winter Soldier and not lose too much. But like, if you haven't watched WandaVision or Loki or What If, then Doctor Strange is going to be, like, wait, what? Like, you're right. You're asking a lot. And now we've got a multiverse, we've got 10 rings, and we've got the Celestials. We've got 3 major story threads going on at the same time. How do you juggle that? And are any of the movies outside of Doctor Strange even going to touch on them going into next year? When's the next time we touch on the Eternals? When's the next time we touch on the Ten Rings? Like, oh my gosh, there's so much out there that you're right. It's going to get confusing. And like, are all three of these elements going to come together in Avengers 5? And if so, like, does the bubble burst when it gets too big? We shall see. I'll stick around as long as I can. So far I have not been terribly disappointed. But bubbles burst. I love the idea that this is sort of Tom Holland's origin story. I do love that we've hit a reset button, that he's out on his own. But yeah, we can do anything with Spider-Man now. We could bring in Felicia Hardy, bring in love interests that we haven't seen much of in the other movies. Bring in other and there's still doors that are wide open from his other films. Like Vulture's technically still alive. Mac Gargan, they haven't even touched on Scorpion yet. They teased Scorpion at the end of Homecoming. Like, there's so much they can still do
Craven
with Tom Holland.
Gwen Stacy.
Yeah,
there's a lot.
But let's talk a little bit about Toby and Andrew real quick. So this film does give them some degree of closure from their franchises, but now that they're back in the public eye in Spider-Man costumes, people are asking, can we see them continue? Do we want to see Toby and Andrew's stories continue in any way? Kyle, I want to go to you first on this one.
Are we going to see them continue? I think we just did. No Way Home gave them that closure, all the closure they never really got. They got to redeem their past mistakes and literally fade into the sunset. It was beautiful. It let us say goodbye. And I think that a solo adventure from either of them now would kind of feel like visiting your high school the year after graduating. It would feel like the same as you remember, but just not quite right.
I like that.
Great.
Jalen, what do you think?
I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, and I would say that I would be very surprised if we did not get a Amazing Spider-Man 3 or Spider-Man 4. Like I feel very strongly that we will get one, if not both of those in the next 10 years. And here's why. Because this movie made $1.5 billion worldwide. Because of money. And honestly, and not only that, but I would love to see this continue. I would love to see Andrew Garfield fight an alien. There's a rumor that because there's this Jared Leto Morbius movie coming out, and there's a rumor that this most recent reason why it was delayed is so they could film scenes with Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. So this Morbius could be Andrew Garfield's Morbius. So I would be very excited to see them continue. But also, if they didn't, I wouldn't be disappointed either, because we do get that closure.
Travis, your take, please.
So I kind of agree on both ends, but for different reasons. Like Toby, I feel like his story throughout his films were pretty good. And this was just a nice little moment that if they were to bring Toby back, I feel like it should only just be for like very rare special occasions and stuff like that. For like an appearance in another Avengers type movie or something like that if they were. Andrew Garfield, I felt like his films, since they cut abruptly and they set up so much that they could continue his story. And yes, we got that redemption arc for him saving Gwen Stacy, but they also established in the film, like, there was a point where after her death, he stopped pulling his punches. And so I'd be interested to see where they could take that aspect, because then seeing Andrew maybe having to like dealing with the consequences of him losing control, because at that point, J. Jonah Jameson had a field day when Spider-Man was like losing control and all of that. And I agree with Jalen. I want to see Andrew fighting an alien. And there's been a lot of talks like Toby had his Venom. They established Tom's going to get his own Venom. Is Andrew going to eventually face off against Tom Hardy's Venom, so that way he can get that kind of satisfaction? But again, like, so Toby, I feel like his story, if you continue it, the most you can do is like show us where they are at this point, but at the same time, I feel like it's not really much you can add to it at this point. But Andrew, I feel like I would want to see continue. I'd be surprised if it didn't continue, especially since it's Sony, and Sony, like, they tend to like usually are okay with continuing stuff like that. I would definitely want to see both of them in another like crossover with Tom Holland in the future, but only if again, I'll talk about this later. There's a topic where I want to add on to this.
I think another crossover would be fun if the story dictates it. I don't want them to bring them back into the MCU just for kicks. I'm also I wouldn't mind the concept of Tobey Maguire coming back as that sort of godfather figure, the way that, you know, we talked about Michael Keaton doing a sort of Batman Beyond type of thing. Would probably be the role I prefer to see him in. But yeah, Tobey's story had much more closure. I rewatched the Garfield movies recently, and the door on those is still wide open. They set up the Sinister Six. As much as I hate to say it, Dane DeHaan's Green Goblin is still out there, and I wish he wasn't. And they also haven't closed the door on the whole storyline with like his parents in that series. So
they have. I hope they have. That one needs to close. Keep that door closed, please.
My favorite drop story point in those films is the fact that his whole motivation for being Spider-Man is to catch Uncle Ben's killer, and he never does. So, like,
that's right. And they also introduced Felicia Hardy in that series, and tragically, she does absolutely nothing. But you just touched a little bit on this, Travis. So, like, and Jalen, like, is Andrew Garfield going to be the Spider-Man of the Venomverse? Because one of the things that they've shown in the Morbius trailer is Spider-Man graffiti. And there has yet to be a Spider-Man who shows up in the Venomverse. So, you know, those rumors that Andrew and Tom Hardy are going to either team up or face off against each other. I mean, honestly, I've seen both Venom movies, and they could use a dose of Spider-Man to come in and make them a little bit better, because on his own, and, you know, I think Tom Hardy is a good choice to play Venom, but the screenplays they've given him so far just aren't that great. And if it takes introducing Spider-Man into his franchise to really finally give Venom the story he deserves, so be it. Because, you know, we know at this point there is going to be a Venom 3. They've set it up, you know. So I don't know what it's going to take to and despite the fact that the Venom films aren't particularly good, they've still been successful, particularly Let There Be Carnage. You know, in a year where we say, you know, get butts and seats, that was one of the movies that did it. It was one of the few films that broke the 200 million mark domestically. So Sony is not going to put an end to that anytime soon. Jalen, the Venomverse, what do we need to do with that?
My biggest criticism about Spider-Man No Way Home is Venom deserved. I'm not sure why they felt the need to include Tom Hardy's Venom if that's all you were going to do with him. Like, there were better ways to introduce a little chunk of the symbiote. Although I am a big fan of seeing Ted Lasso actors show up in the MCU, so hopefully it brings more of that. But he needed to be there with the other 5 villains. Like, it is called a Sinister Six and not a Sinister Five. So that would have been nice. Or even if it wouldn't have been Tom Hardy, and I don't know how everyone else would react to it. I would have been like, oh, okay. But if it would have been Topher Grace Venom showing up with the other five, or two Venoms, or two Vultures, or two Lizards, but Venom deserved better. I wish he would have had like an actual role in the movie than just a post credit. Oh, I'm here. Oh, now I'm gone.
On the one hand, yeah, I think Venom does deserve better. But on the other hand, I think that's the best rug pull that they've done, is saying, hey, everybody, you all wanted Tom Hardy to team up with Tom Holland or to fight Tom Holland. Here you go. Nope. Joke's on you. Travis, what would your take on that?
It was definitely one of the biggest rug pulls in my opinion. The after credit scene of Let There Be Carnage did like establish something like, not even just like, oh, he's in the MCU, but like right before Venom talks about like we have a multiversal hive mind, and then when he sees the Spider-Man, he immediately knows stuff about him, like that guy, which made a lot of people think like, oh, is he connected to the Topher Grace Venom, like, and that's how he knows Spider-Man and all that. And I believe like the writers did confirm that Venom was initially supposed to be in the climax, but then they cut it out for reasons. While I would have liked to seen Tom Hardy like again like interact with the Spider-Man, I do agree like they're not the best films with the best writing, and I feel like there'd be a lot of retconning because like they established those films as Venom as like an anti-hero, so it'd be a lot of like retconning or convoluted writing to establish why he's fighting another hero like Spider-Man. Whereas with how they did it, okay, girlfriend's just like, they could have made Venom work with Spider-Man, but I'm just like, I don't know. People want Venom versus Spider-Man, and I feel like this way that Marvel can do what they want. They could reintroduce Venom as a pure villain, like he has been in the past, and not the anti-hero. And that way Sony can still do their own standalone franchise with the character. I still would have liked to seen some interaction, like even if it's not Venom, like Tom Hardy goes up to Tom Holland or something and interacts with him in some way. But I'm interested to see where it goes. Are they going to bring in their own Eddie Brock? Are they going to have a different character as Venom? I just hope that they handle him better than they did in Spider-Man 3.
Yeah,
Definitely. And it doesn't necessarily have to be strictly Venom, as the comics have shown. The symbiote could go ahead and attach itself to, let's just pluck someone out of the air. Thor. Symbiote Thor. Like, it could be anybody. I don't think it's going to be Thor, but
this
Kyle,
says the makings of an amazing What If episode. Symbiote everyone's in now. You're at yeah.
You get a symbiote.
I mean,
you get a symbiote.
You get a symbiote.
That is a comic book storyline where you have like symbiote wars. So not too far out of the realm of possibility. Kyle, what's your take on like pretty much everything Venom going on?
I think the idea of making everything a verse is just a cash grab and not customer friendly. I think that tonally, the Venomverse does not fit in the Marvel universe. I also think it'd be very strange to have Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man fighting him in that more gritty world, because Andrew Garfield's more like a comic in those movies. I think it was a brilliant way to introduce the symbiotes and remove Tom Hardy. They can like acknowledge that those films exist, but they're not beholden to them. They're going to introduce Venom in their own way and take him in their own direction, as y'all have already stated. I think it was just a good way to acknowledge that it has already been done and we're going to do it differently.
Yeah, I love the idea that these films are not necessarily now considered MCU, but I've came up with the term, these are the MCU adjacent films.
Yeah.
You don't have to have seen them to know what's going on in the MCU, but that knowledge, it doesn't hurt.
They're canon by
particularly those
association.
Raimi films. So at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, Peter Parker is unmasked for the first time in a Spider-Man film. In the comic books, he unmasks during Civil War voluntarily. But Peter's at a completely different point in his life in the films. I just think it's so interesting that at this point in the films, Peter is one of the few characters who has to maintain that secret identity. And I just want to ask why. And because I think that has a lot to do with privilege. Tony has money. Steve is a World War II hero. Natasha works for the government. Clint works for the government. Thor's a god. Like, why is it poor Peter has to suffer when everyone else can just be who they are? Kyle, I actually want to go to you first on this one.
I'm glad you mentioned Civil War, because I was really disappointed that we didn't get those politics in Civil War, the movie version. Because the question of whether vigilantes are obligated to play by the rules or to reveal their identities and be held accountable is an interesting one. To your point, Steve Rogers didn't have a choice. Tony Stark did. But he was a billionaire who could afford that scrutiny, and Peter can't. And I think that they showed that really, really well here. All those questions were sort of answered. And his choice to not reveal himself to MJ and Ned at the end was touching and very selfless.
And I actually wanted to go back to a point. I think Travis may have made it about how I'm glad that No Way Home doesn't linger too long on the whole, is he guilty of killing Mysterio? That they really resolved that as quickly as they could, because honestly, the only important part that came out of that was he was unmasked. Like, honestly, because like the second you really take a moment to think about it, it's like, there's no way. Like, it should be very easy to figure out that Mysterio was a former Stark employee and not, it shouldn't be that hard to unravel that mystery. Jalen, unmasking, privilege. Why must Peter suffer so?
Oh, I completely agree with Kyle. It's because he can't afford that same scrutiny that Tony Stark can. He's just a high schooler. People can get to him. People can't get to Tony Stark, unless you're fake Mandarin. But yeah, he would easily. I mean, if Kingpin knew who Spider-Man was, he would. Again, not to jump, but if Kingpin knew who Spider-Man was, like, Aunt May would be, well, considering what happens to her, but I mean, Aunt May would be dead a lot sooner. He would have been attacked at prom. Vulture let him go, but then 3 more bad guys show up at prom. But yeah, he can't afford to. Well, with great power comes great responsibility, and he has to keep his friends and family safe as they can. Until the end of the movie.
You bring up a good point too, and so far, Spider-Man, as far as I know, is really the only character in the MCU who is, a kid. Not counting Sprite in Eternals for, at least in the plot of that particular film.
Or Shuri.
Oh yeah.
I guess she's a teenager. She's so smart.
But she's also creating nanobots for fun.
Yeah.
Nanobots. A secret country that nobody knows about. So
yeah,
she's
creating the nanobots. Thanks, Wakanda.
I think we're going to get a little bit more of that feeling when Miss Marvel comes to Disney Plus, because that's going to be, the next teenage superhero they introduce.
Well, we got Kate Bishop. She's still.
That's true. But she also has the privilege of wealth.
Yeah.
And she also has, the privilege of a beloved mentor. as was established, if you're Hawkeye, you can get your expensive dinner in New York comped. But if you're Sam Wilson, you can't get a loan. That's a whole other topic for.
That's a. Well, he wasn't at the Battle of
You
New
know.
York. Sam Wilson wasn't at the Battle of New York.
Yeah, but Sam Wilson was
Hawkeye
at the
seems
freaking
cool, like a really
battle
nice guy.
to save the world from Thanos. So that's got to count for something, right?
Well, I definitely agree with like Jalen and Kyle. Like other characters might have like money or power or something like that, but like I think another big factor that plays into it is that Spider-Man is just a teenager. Like he's gonna make mistakes. Like even his mentor Iron Man, they really hammer in like he made mistakes. Like when like Happy Hogan was talking to him, like even he wasn't. But Iron Man also has life experience. Like he knows how to handle a lot of like issues that come in. Whereas like Peter Parker, like he doesn't have that life experience. He's still young. He's not fought like that many powerful villains at first. And like he's another thing is just like a matter of like who do you trust with your secret identity? Yes, like Aunt May, MJ, and Ned, they were all good, but like he trusted Mysterio, he leaked his identity. He trusted all these villains, and that leads to the death of his aunt. So it's a matter of like a very important thing is like who in your life do you trust with those big secrets? Which Spider-Man, like since he was young, he just expected the good out of most people and just believed whatever they told him, and he had to face the consequences of that. So and I think that's maybe one thing I'm hoping we get to look at in the next set of films is like Spider-Man learning like how can he trust who and to protect those that he loves. Because again, like Iron Man, you know, like they like Kyle and Jalen said, he's got money, he's got all kinds of security. Thor's a god, like the only thing that could really kill him is like something from Asgard, really. But and all Cap has like the government and all that, whatever. But Spider-Man doesn't have all that.
And you know what? Another thing that Spider-Man doesn't have anymore either is because we're kind of unsure what the state is, the security of the Avengers. Because post Endgame, we really don't know what state the Avengers are in. You know, they've lost 3 of their, you know, most prominent leaders. Who steps in to take over? You know, so he's got to think about that going forward too. And it's going to be so interesting that you know, the surviving Avengers probably remember working with Spider-Man in Endgame, but not who he is.
Yeah.
So that's going to be really, really curious going forward to see how he sort of interacts with the Avengers next time around. But let's talk about a character who existed in the MCU in a weird way, and then we're all still kind of wondering how canon is he, and that is of course Daredevil. And what a brilliant strategy it was, brilliant in its own way for the people who watch the movies and do all the Disney Plus stuff, to introduce Kingpin and Daredevil in the same week, sort of back into the MCU after several years of absence. On the one hand, if you're able to catch Hawkeye and see Spider-Man, you know, like that, that's awesome. On the other hand, as we've discussed earlier when Kyle brought it up, there's so much going on. You can't always keep up with everything. So, Jalen, how significant is this that you know, that Daredevil and the Kingpin are back?
I really appreciate that Kevin Feige is allowing what the best parts of some of those things were to carry over into his MCU. So happy to see them back. You know, if you had to say what some of the best things about the Netflix shows were, Kingpin and Daredevil would definitely be at the top of that list. I would love more things from those universes to cross over. if everything ended up crossing over, I would not mind it ultimately. Yeah, even you, Iron Fist. But hopefully this leads into more stuff from the Netflix universes crossing over into the MCU as well. And hopefully more Kingpin. Lots more Kingpin.
So, Kyle, how familiar are you with the Netflix series?
I have not seen any of them, and I would prefer that they remain canon adjacent, as y'all said before. I haven't seen them. I don't really plan on seeing them. It makes no difference to me if they're canon, but I'd like for it to be a separate pocket that doesn't factor into the main films. For someone like me, the Matt Murdock scene in Spider-Man would have been so confusing if I didn't already know that he was Daredevil, which I only knew because of the news about him being in the MCU that circulated like the day before. So who is this blind guy who can catch a brick thrown from behind him, and why didn't he come back to play later in the narrative? They would sort of need a proper introduction and like follow through on those characters if they bring them in. So if they do, they have to approach it the same way they approach the villains in these movies, assuming no knowledge of them. Give us everything we need to know in order to be up to speed, having not actually seen those shows. Even with their main canon shows on Disney Plus, I think that they should approach introducing those elements into the movies with that same lack of assumption.
Yeah, that's a really good point because, for one thing, the Netflix series are a lot darker, a lot grittier than anything that has been shown in the movies or the Disney Plus shows. Even what we got of Kingpin in Hawkeye was much less menacing overall than he is on Netflix. And as much as I love what Vincent D'Onofrio and Charlie Cox brought to the characters on Netflix, and as much as I love what Kristen Ritter brought to Jessica Jones with David Tennant in that series, and with Luke Cage, I thought was very good. I thought Punisher was generally good. You do kind of have to reintroduce these characters if they're going to reintroduce any of them with that assumption, because you're going to have a lot of people who aren't willing to delve into those Netflix series, either because they are too dark and too gritty, or because they just don't want to play catch up. And with Daredevil in particular, there's a lot to catch up with. Daredevil and Jessica Jones each got 3 seasons. And people may also not want to catch up because, the Netflix shows also have a history of being either extraordinarily good, if you're Daredevil or Jessica Jones, or you could be Iron Fist, which, has often been looked at as one of the worst things that Marvel has done since they've gotten to be so big. Travis, did you ever get into the Netflix shows, and what's your take on starting to bring these characters into the usual MCU?
I'm with Kyle on that matter, where it's like I haven't really seen them just because I wasn't really too into it initially. Like, I love the actors and I feel like they all did great jobs. Like, I've seen stuff they've done. But another problem that the Netflix shows have, that even the Disney Plus shows, it's like you have the 4 series going on. Imagine having to watch 4 seasons of a show to watch another season of another show, The Defenders, and then because it's one thing when you could put in a movie, sit there for 2 hours and do that a couple for 4 movies, and then watch a team up movie. But having to sit through all of those shows, and having to make sure you're watching them in the correct order, so it's not like you watch season 1 of Daredevil, and then you go in season 2 and they're referencing The Defenders, and you're like, wait, now I got to watch Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, watch The Defenders, and then I have to come back to season 2 or whatever of Daredevil. I feel like while it's great to bring back the actors, I personally feel like they should just do their own thing and say like it is separate, and say these are variants of those versions of the characters, so that way it'd be easier to integrate them in, and general audiences don't have to sit through like all of that, because they're not going to do that, especially with the shows being so older and new stuff is coming out that they still have to get caught up on. I do like how they did Daredevil being the one to represent Spider-Man, but I agree with Kyle, they should have had much more significance there, not just like a quick cameo. and Kingpin, I feel like you said, Ben, he's not as intimidating, and I know like a lot of fans are not going to be happy. The Netflix fans are not going to be happy with like that interpretation and how they say like, oh, he fought Daredevil and yet gets taken out by Kate Bishop so easily.
I would say Kingpin was even more threatening in Hawkeye than he was in Daredevil. I thought he was plenty threatening in Hawkeye, and he takes that arrow to the chest and he's just like, what? No, and just swats
that
it
was
down.
A badass moment, I'm not gonna lie.
Oh God. When he walks out and he's got the cane and just perfection. That Hawaiian shirt, just perfection.
Well, when I say threatening, I mean they literally can't get away with the stuff that they got away with on Netflix. Like, you can't smash. I think the first time you meet him on the Netflix series, he smashes someone's head with in the car. It's like you can't do that, or like just how physical he gets in his fights with Daredevil, like this in season 2 where he beats Matt Murdock up in the prison. It's like you can't do that to that same degree, on a Disney Plus series or in a Disney sanctioned film. It's a slippery slope, bringing those characters in, and I hope that our next appearance with Matt Murdock, we do get a little bit more exposition for his character for those who haven't been able to experience Daredevil or don't care to, and that's absolutely fine. I contend that Daredevil is one of the best things they've come up with, but it's been so long since those Netflix shows have felt relevant that it's difficult to bring them back the same way you can bring back stuff from old Spider-Man films. There's rumors that we will get Matt Murdock showing up in the She-Hulk Disney Plus series, which makes sense. They're both lawyers, so that would be a perfect way to introduce that character in a more official way than we've seen already. Let's talk about other legacy Marvel stuff. Like I already kind of said that I'm not terribly interested in bringing back other legacy characters from older franchises, because none of those franchises, with one exception, have been as popular or as successful as Spider-Man. I think we'd all rather forget most of what happened with any iteration of the Fantastic Four. I think that the Thomas Jane Punisher is fine enough on its own. I don't think he ever needs to be brought in. Does anyone feel any strong opinions about whether something should or should not be brought in from a legacy Marvel series or movie?
I will say, like, for the most part, I don't think that they should bring in like legacy characters into the main MCU, just because of various reasons. I feel like it's okay because in Doctor Strange 2, like, there's already rumors like there's going to be so many, like, we're going to see a lot of those characters pop up, like 6 X-Men from the from the films, Ian Grufford coming back as Mr. Fantastic, Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider. I feel like that should just be like quick little like acknowledgments that, oh, these characters exist in other universes. But I don't think like for example, like, I love Ian McKellen, I love Patrick Stewart, but they're getting up there and they can't play Magneto and Professor X forever. Hugh Jackman, he's played the part so many times, he's tired of getting typecasted in the role. I feel like, because throughout this whole thing, I've been saying like, oh, I'm going to talk about this later, and I feel like this is a good part to talk about. That I feel like they're setting up like a Secret Wars type event, which is like where they merge multiple universes together into a singular universe. I feel like that would work, but they can't use the legacy characters. Acknowledge that those ones exist, but I feel like they still need to introduce their own versions of the characters so that way it can be their own thing. And honestly, I think that could work with the X-Men too, saying like, oh, these characters from other universes are mutants and we don't like them, but we still like the characters from our own universe. Stuff like that to really fit in with the X-Men's theme of like prejudice and stuff like that. But I feel like other franchises like acknowledge they exist, but like we're moving on in the future. We're not gonna have you keep playing the characters for another 20 years.
I definitely agree. It never hurts to acknowledge that, out there in the multiverse, there's a universe where the 20th Century Fox X-Men movies are a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather they not bring, and I'll jump straight into the X-Men for this. I'd rather they not give the X-Men the same type of treatment that they just gave Spider-Man, if only because the timeline of the X-Men movies is already convoluted and confusing enough as it is. We don't need to bring that in to the MCU, which, as Kyle has pointed out, is starting to get convoluted and very bigger than they may be able to handle. They don't need that extra baggage of the timeline hopping weirdness that the X-Men movies have brought. And does anyone else have anything else to add to that particular part of the conversations? I think we've covered it pretty well.
It's a slippery slope when you start introducing all of these legacy characters. I mean, when we first saw the initial one of these, which was in the post credits for Spider-Man: Far From Home, when J.K. Simmons returned as J. Jonah Jameson, and everyone in the theater went yes. Because who else? Seriously, God, that man is a god. But when you just start bringing everybody back. I mean, I don't mind if Daredevil and Kingpin, and honestly, I hope they are playing new versions of the characters and not the Netflix ones. Mm-hmm. Like, I hope that's what it ends up being. Because that would make it a bit easier on the palate. But if you bring everybody back, it's just like Kyle said, it just dilutes the specialness of these characters. Mm-hmm. We want to see these characters again in the, we definitely want to see these characters again in the MCU, but that doesn't mean we want, and I mean, no offense to the actors I'm going to name, but if it was James Marsden as Cyclops, we're like, okay, really? Or James McAvoy or Michael Fassbender. And it's just like, but it doesn't work. I mean, the only way it could have worked to do the X-Men legacy characters is if at the very end of X-Men Days of Future Past, which they've already done, so you can't do it again, MCU. Please don't for at least another 25 years. Also, please don't give us another Dark Phoenix until like the 2100s. If at the end of Days of Future Past, Wolverine's walking around the mansion and says hi to Kelsey Grammer's Beast and everything, and then suddenly Tony Stark comes out of nowhere and goes, "Hey, Charles, how's it going?" You're just like, "Wait, what?" But they do need to bring back Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool and X-Force. That I will say. The one caveat is we do need Deadpool and X-Force. Those should be the only X-Men that come back, are the ones from that, because to stop that at 2 would be an incredible disservice for humankind.
Or recasting him would just be no.
Yeah, no, you like that's but stop it with Deadpool. Like, we don't need to see Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, and Hugh Jackman, but it ends with Ryan Reynolds and Josh Brolin and everybody else.
I sort of disagree with that. I'd like Deadpool to kind of be its own separate thing. I think the way that they could handle it is with a single movie that effectively passes the torch onto the new MCU X-Men. A whole new lineup of mutants, not even ones we've seen before, with new actors. And then completely cut ties with everything before it. Again, like the symbiote, acknowledge the stuff that came before, but take it in their own direction. I think it would be fine to keep McAvoy and Fassbender as Professor X and Magneto, because they're fantastic. And with the right, Marvel level script, they could be handled exceptionally well. But yeah, do not, for the love of God, do not revive Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. That ship has sailed. I would like them to introduce the X-Men, but speaking of effed up timelines, that they cannot incorporate what exists. They should acknowledge it and then make it their own thing.
Yeah, and honestly, I do think that that's kind of where they're heading, because like there is rumors. I always mispronounce this guy's name. Iona Grufford, the guy who played Mr. Fantastic in the 2005 Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
He's said to be in Doctor Strange too. And there's also talks that John Krasinski is coming in to play another version of Mr. Fantastic. And I'm wondering, is that going to be like it's a passing of the torch from that actor to that actor? Well, at least I hope that they're going to bring John Krasinski in as Mr. Fantastic. I think he could be a great. And I hope they're not just going to be like, hey, he's playing this character for 5 seconds. You fans got what you want, or something like that. But I definitely agree. It's like a lot of those actors, they played the character so many times, and it's just like it's going to be hard if you're going to want to incorporate like the messed up timeline and all of that. So like I said, like acknowledge they exist, but use this as an opportunity to say like, now we're going to take this version.
This isn't Marvel, but I think another character that needs the No Way Home treatment is Batman.
Yes.
We need a reason for why the heck 18 different people have played this character.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, we need a Michael Keaton, Christian Bale, Robert Pattinson, Ben Affleck, Will Arnett's live action Lego Batman.
That would be funny. One other thing I want to address with like if they do bring in some legacy actors is a question I'm asking is like if they bring in those actors, and this can also apply to Toby and Andrew, now that they would be established as variants of other characters, could they even introduce them as other characters in the MCU? And because that could get confusing for general audiences at that point.
You mean the actors? Introduce the actors as different characters?
I think so. I think
so like have Tobey Maguire, like you already established him. I'm just using this as an example. Like Tobey Maguire, you bring him in as Spider-Man. Could he then still play a different character in the MCU and say he's like a variant of that? Or like if you bring in Patrick Stewart as Professor X, could Professor X be another character? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Because then that's also at that point, all right, so you're limiting that actor's appearance in the franchise, and it's just like
I think there's a difference between instances like Gemma Chan playing Cersei in Eternals and Minerva in Captain Marvel, where she's clearly two distinct characters and you can't even recognize them. I don't think you can have Tobey Maguire come back to play a different character in the MCU. I think, and I suggested this on Twitter not too long ago, I would love to see Hugh Jackman come into the MCU and play someone who's not Logan. Like have him do like a Robert Redford type of, maybe come in and play that type of Robert Redford villain that Winter Soldier had. Have Patrick Stewart play a completely different character than Professor X. People are going to be like, but this is who he was. He's Logan. It's like, well, no, he's not Logan anymore, everyone. He's Hugh Jackman.
And that's also why I'm talking about this, like, because if they do introduce like too many legacy characters, it's just like we can't really use them in future movies and all of that. So like that's another thing that they would have to really take into consideration is like,
I wonder how they're going to handle Chris Evans as the Human Torch.
I thought that would be a good joke, but yeah, you're right.
How about
that's the one that should appear in Multiverse of Madness, not Iowan Griffold's.
But Captain America already got such beautiful closure. I wouldn't want to see him again.
Yeah. Or we could do the other Human Torch with Michael B. Jordan and then be like, hey, you look like Killmonger.
Or just be like, wait, Captain America is the Human Torch? What is
I've said it before and I'll say it again. The path to greatness in the MCU is through a mediocre Fantastic Four movie as the Human Torch.
It's 2 for 2.
I'll take that to heart.
I think that's a good wrap for that conversation. And I think it's time to move on to our final thoughts for this episode. Jalen, what are your final thoughts on anything you've talked about? Spider-Man, MCU craziness. Take us away.
The best time I had at the theater in a very, 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 very long time. Had that Dark Knight excitement in the theater. I would just end on just again reiterating that Willem Dafoe deserves some serious Oscar consideration for supporting actor for this movie. And I don't know if there's a lot of talk about how it should get nominated for Best Picture so people would actually watch the Oscars. I don't know if I would nominate it for Best Picture, but I would not be sorry if it was. But Willem Dafoe definitely merits some serious Oscar consideration for this and would be my pick for Best Supporting Actor out of the ones that I've seen so far.
Travis, your final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Like I said, it was a really good movie. Initially watching it, I would have put it within the top 5 of the MCU. I'm still not sure where I would put it. At the very least, it would still be like high mid top 10. It does have its problems. I talked about plot holes and like there's so much convenient writing. Like for example, how like the 3 Spider-Men in 5 minutes can like make antidotes for all these villains when like it took entire movies just, and they still couldn't even stop them on their own separate merits and all of that. But I do think it was a good love letter to all 3 generations of Spider-Man. And there's even small little moments I appreciate, like the fact that when we first see Andrew Garfield, he's in Spider-Man outfit, because fans generally say he's the best Spider-Man, and Tobey's in normal clothes because he's generally considered the best Peter Parker. So little moments like that were like little nice nods to the fans and all of that. And I'm excited to see where this franchise goes. I'm gonna start both the Spider-Man and like how this is gonna lead into other MCU stuff. But standalone, it's definitely one of their best.
I appreciate some of the meta moments they have.
The Spider-Man pointing.
Like Spider-Man pointing and just, Garfield getting so down on himself, like, oh, I'm not such a great Spider-Man, and Tobey picking him up and saying, you're amazing.
Yeah.
It's
You're
like,
amazing.
That's not just, that's saying, hey, you know what? We may not love your movies. We love you.
Yeah.
The Avengers. Is that a band? Are you in a band? Yeah. That's awesome.
I love that there's finally a moment in the MCU where it's just like the Avengers are not big characters to these people. Like finally, it's just like they're not put on the pedestal. They're just like, all right, great. How's that help us? We don't know who the hell they are.
Avengers.
Yeah.
What is that?
Toby's back.
Yeah.
Yep. Stretch out his back.
Oh, Toby's back.
Good. I completely forgot to mention one of the things I did appreciate about Tom Holland's Spider-Man over the other 2, and that we're probably going to get into more as he continues, is that he's not alone in the universe, and he is now, but he wasn't. And so we didn't get a Spider-Man who was so mopey about, I'm the only person who can do this. It's like, it's got to be the best feeling to know that you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And if Tobey and Andrew's storylines do continue, I hope that that's something they take to heart with those characters, is the knowledge that they're finally not alone. So, Kyle, your final thoughts.
I remember leaving Endgame and just taking a walk in the middle of the night thinking, wow, I don't know if I could ever watch another movie again. That was just so much movie in that movie that it was like the movie to end all movies. But going and seeing a movie like No Way Home, I'm glad that I'm still watching movies, that they're still making these things because it is such a wonderful love letter. They handled it so brilliantly. They didn't. There was plenty of fan service, but not nearly in the like Rise of Skywalker way. It was meta, but appropriately so. It fit into their narrative, fit into the script, and again, did not assume knowledge, but winked at you if you got it. Mm-hmm. They did it justice. They did a huge thing. They accomplished quite a lot. And they gave themselves a reset button for a whole bunch of different things. So this served a very important function in the MCU, and I'm ecstatic to see where it goes. I will, however, I think they should also trust their audiences a little more, at least in terms of marketing. I made that point. They should have told us less about it and let us be surprised by how much they accomplished.
I think that is something that the entire industry can take to heart. and not just film, but television, video games, any form of entertainment in which you need to keep something under wraps. If you're out there leaking stuff, shame on you, because one of the reasons that some studios have to release stuff in trailers and do that kind of thing is because some bozo got captured the trailer on their phone and released a really crappy video to YouTube, and then what's Sony's response? Well, we have to do something. We can't keep under wraps anymore. So if you're out there, leakers, and you're watching this, stop it.
Well, sometimes the stars even leak themselves by accident. I think Jamie Foxx was the first one to post something about all 3 Spider-Men, and Tom Hardy shared a photo of him wearing No Way Home on-set merch and all that, like they gave to crew members, which is why like a lot of these stuff started to even spread, and Marvel had to play like catch up and all that.
Actors, stop leaking your own stuff.
They're pros. They've done this before. How is this like hard for them?
Well, at least it's not Tom Holland or Mark Ruffalo this time.
Yes, yeah.
They're learning. They have to make that first mistake, but they're learning.
So, Spider-Man, biggest movie of the year, most talked about among people who can talk about it. I want to thank everyone out there on social media who's doing their due diligence and not spoiling it for the people out there who haven't gone to see it yet, whether because they're being cautious about COVID or they're not the type of people who go out to see movies right away. Thank you for that, because this is the type of movie that the less you know, the more enjoyable of a time you're going to have.
Yes.
Was it my favorite movie of the year? Honestly, I don't think it was, but I have my own personal reasons for that, which I'm going to get into in the future episode when I discuss 2021 as a whole. Was it my favorite Marvel movie of last year? Easily.
Yes.
Black Widow was fun, but it came as a little too late. Shang-Chi was an absolute delight and easily my second favorite Marvel movie of the year. And I'm glad that they're introducing new characters. Again, a little worried about some of the bigger plot threads they're trying to introduce while they're introducing other big plot threads. Eternals was good for what it was, and may have been them shooting a little too high or flying too close to the sun, as it were,
close to the sun
with their storytelling. But No Way Home, it just hit just right. They handled the story, they handled the reintegration of so many classic characters so well. And they got me interested in going back and watching all these old movies again, which is a good thing. Even though I look back on them and say, you know what, Spider-Man 3, Amazing Spider-Man 2, you could have been better. But this was an instance where the writers and the creative team and the directors and the actors got to make the movie they wanted, and the studio just sort of thankfully, imagine what would have happened if Sony, I pick on Sony in particular because they love to butt in and screw with things, and that's why Spider-Man 3 and Amazing 2 are kind of iffy. If they had sort of done that to this, we could have had, the sinister billion and been like, oh God. But no, we got the villains we needed. We got the fixes we needed. I love the whole reset concept. I'm looking forward to seeing a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man start in a place that is both familiar and new. So it is time to close this out with some trivia. So Kyle, this is your first time on the show. So what we do is I ask a multiple choice question. And at the end of the year, whoever has the most points, they get a prize. We did not hand out a prize last year because I sort of stopped in middle of July. And we had a 3-way tie. So I decided to roll the points over. Jalen and Travis are currently tied for the lead with 3 points apiece. So this could be a chance for one of you to pull ahead. You're also tied with Sarah, by the way. So Sarah missed last week's trivia question, so this is your chance to pull ahead of her. So This week's trivia question is, which of the following No Way Home villains is not a founding member of the Sinister Six in the Spider-Man comic books? Is it Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Sandman, or Electro? Does anyone actually know this?
I think I know this. Kyle knows this. I made a video talking about who I thought the sixth member was going to be in No Way Home, only to be proven wrong. I never got that video released because the editing software on my computer was so terrible, and it's just like, But I even acknowledged the founding members of the Sinister Six. So if I get this wrong, I'm gonna look foolish.
Well, I'm going to go to you last then, since you seem to have some sort of knowledge of this. Jalen, I'm going to go to you first.
This is going to be a pure guess. So I'm actually glad you're going with Travis last on this one. But I'm going to say that it is Green Goblin.
All right, one for Green Goblin. Kyle, who do you think it is?
2 for Goblin.
And Travis?
Just to be safe, can I hear the options again?
Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Sandman, and Electro.
It's Green Goblin.
Well, I would like to congratulate all three of you. Travis, Jalen, you have pulled ahead of Sarah. Kyle, you are on the board. Yeah, believe it or not, Green Goblin, Spider-Man's ultimate nemesis, not a founding member of the Sinister Six.
I only asked because, like, I thought you said lizard as an option, and I'm like, that's definitely not an option either. So I just misheard one of them.
So yeah, congratulations to everyone.
Woo!
So yeah, that is it. That's official. We are episode 34 is basically done. Thank you, Travis, Jalen, Kyle, everyone out there.
Pleasure,
Everyone out there, I thank you for watching. Follow on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all the things. If you're going out there to the movies right now, stay safe, get vaccinated. We want you to be out there enjoying your entertainment in the safest way possible. And the best way for us to get back to the movies, to make these movies successful, you know what? 2021 only had one $1 billion film. It was Spider-Man. You know, I'm not saying give money to all these crazy corporations or anything, but you know, I want to keep movie theaters alive is basically what I'm saying. Keep movie theaters alive because I love enjoying experiences like No Way Home in a movie theater.
Yes.
There's no better way to experience it. So stay safe, take care, everyone. Have a good day.